While most Americans were busy debating the latest Tesla stock price, a seismic shift was happening on the other side of the world. One that could fundamentally alter who controls the future of American transportation, defense, and energy independence. Chinese scientists have just achieved what many considered impossible: a lithium battery breakthrough that doubles the energy storage capacity of Tesla's most advanced cells, and Beijing has already moved to lock down this technology with export restrictions that put American interests squarely in their crosshairs. This isn't just another tech headline. This is about a strategic technology that powers everything from our military drones to our electric vehicles. And China just pulled ahead in a race that America thought it was still running. Let's unpack what's really happening here, and why this matters far more than most people realize. The breakthrough comes from researchers at Tianjin University, who have developed a lithium metal battery achieving over 600 watt-hours per kilogram. That's double Tesla's current 300 Watt-kg benchmark, and light years ahead of other competitors like BYD's 150 Watt-kg. To put this in perspective, this means an electric vehicle could potentially travel 600 to 1,200 miles on a single charge, completely eliminating range anxiety while making the battery lighter, safer, and faster charging. The technology has already been successfully tested in drones, extending flight time by 2.8 times. But here's where it gets really interesting from a strategic standpoint. The Chinese researchers didn't just stumble onto this breakthrough. They fundamentally reimagined how lithium ions behave within batteries through something called a delocalized electrolyte design. Instead of the rigid, orderly arrangements that limit performance in current batteries, their approach creates a more disordered, fluid microenvironment that allows enhanced ion transport and stability. It's published in Nature, it's proven, and it represents a 200 to 300% improvement over existing lithium metal battery technology. Now you might be thinking, great, better batteries are good for everyone, right? Well, not exactly. Because China didn't just develop this technology, they've already moved to control it. In July 2024, Beijing implemented new export restrictions on 8 key EV battery technologies, requiring government licenses for any overseas technology transfers. These controls specifically target cathode material production technologies and lithium extraction processes, effectively creating a technological moat around their battery advances. This is where the picture becomes clearer about China's long-term strategy. They don't just want to make better batteries, they want to control the entire global supply chain that makes batteries possible. And the data shows they're succeeding spectacularly. China now controls 76% of global lithium-ion battery production, 95% of battery-grade graphite processing, 94% of LFP battery production capacity, and 70% of global processed lithium production. When you control the raw materials, the processing, and the manufacturing, you essentially hold a kill switch over everyone else's technology sector. The implications for American national security are staggering. The Pentagon has recognized this vulnerability, which is why the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act prohibits the Defense Department from procuring batteries containing Chinese-sourced materials beginning in October 2027. But here's the problem. We're now in 2025, and American battery manufacturing is nowhere near ready to fill that gap. A single Army Brigade combat team in the field consumes the energy equivalent of hundreds of homes daily, and future military systems like directed energy weapons will need megawatts of pulsed power. When China controls the battery supply chain, they effectively control America's military readiness. The economic implications are equally concerning. Despite over $130 billion in EV investments in the United States, American companies are still fundamentally dependent on Chinese-controlled supply chains. Ford's partnership with KTL to build an EV factory in Michigan using Chinese technology, Tesla's reliance on Chinese battery suppliers, and GM's scrambling to secure lithium sources through investments in North and South American mining companies, all underscore just how behind America really is in this critical technology race. The Biden administration tried to address this through the Inflation Reduction Act, offering up to $7,500 in tax credits for new electric vehicles and implementing strict battery sourcing rules to encourage domestic supply chains. The legislation allocated $12 billion specifically for EV incentives and required that EV batteries be manufactured using materials from countries with free trade agreements with the United States. But these policy measures, while well-intentioned, are essentially trying to build a domestic industry from scratch, while China has spent decades systematically capturing every link in the global supply chain. Here's what makes China's strategy particularly sophisticated. It's not just about making better products, it's about creating dependencies that are extremely difficult to break. When 95% of battery-grade graphite processing happens in China, when Chinese companies own 86% of Indonesia's nickel extraction, and when Beijing controls the vast majority of cobalt processing despite most cobalt being mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo, they've created a web of interdependence that gives them enormous geopolitical leverage. The recent Pentagon designation of CATL, the world's largest battery producer, as a Chinese military company, highlights just how intertwined commercial and military interests have become in this sector. CATL supplies batteries to Ford and Tesla, but the Pentagon has determined they work directly or indirectly with the Chinese military. This creates an impossible situation for American companies who need advanced batteries, but can't access the most advanced technology without potentially compromising national security. American automakers are desperately trying to catch up. GM has announced $7 billion in investments to make Michigan the epicenter of the electric vehicle industry, and has partnered with companies like EnergyX and Lithium Americas to secure domestic lithium sources. Ford is investing in North American mining and processing facilities, and both companies are working to establish battery manufacturing plants on American soil. But building a domestic supply chain takes years, and China's head start combined with their willingness to use non-market practices like subsidies, price manipulation, and export controls gives them massive structural advantages. The technology export restrictions China implemented in July 2024 reveal just how seriously Beijing takes this strategic advantage. By requiring government licenses for technology transfers involving lithium iron phosphate preparation, lithium manganese iron phosphate technologies, and phosphate cathode raw material preparation, China is essentially saying they'll decide who gets access to the most advanced battery technologies and under what conditions. This isn't free market competition. This is industrial policy as a weapon of strategic competition. What's particularly concerning is the timeline mismatch. China's battery breakthrough is happening now, in 2025, with pilot production lines already established and full-scale production expected to begin in the second half of this year. Meanwhile, American efforts to build domestic battery supply chains won't reach meaningful scale until well into the late 2020s. That's a multi-year window where China will have both technological superiority and supply chain control, potentially allowing them to flood global markets with advanced batteries while denying access to American competitors. The defense implications extend far beyond just military procurement. Modern warfare increasingly depends on distributed power systems, from soldier-worn electronics to unmanned systems to directed energy weapons. When a single soldier's gear requires carrying dozens of pounds of batteries, and when future combat systems will need megawatt-level power storage, battery technology becomes as critical as ammunition. China's advancement in this area gives them a significant military-industrial advantage that could persist for years. From an economic perspective, this represents a potential replay of what happened with solar panels, rare earth minerals, and semiconductor manufacturing, industries where American innovation was eventually overtaken by Chinese industrial policy and strategic investments. The difference is that batteries are even more foundational to the future economy, powering everything from transportation to grid storage to mobile technology. The Biden administration's response through the Inflation Reduction Act and various industrial policy measures represents a recognition of the challenge, but the scale and timing may not be sufficient. While $130 billion in announced EV and battery investment sounds impressive, China has been playing this game for decades with sustained government support, market manipulation, and strategic long-term planning. American efforts are essentially trying to build an industry while China perfects and scales technologies they already control. Looking ahead, the Chinese battery breakthrough creates a strategic dilemma for American policymakers and industry. Do we accept technological dependence on a strategic competitor for one of the most critical technologies of the 21st century? Do we try to rapidly scale domestic alternatives, even if they're initially less competitive? Or do we find ways to work with Chinese advances while protecting national security interests? The answer likely requires a combination of approaches: accelerated domestic investment through tools like the Defense Production Act, strategic partnerships with allies who can provide alternative supply sources, and potentially aggressive trade measures to prevent Chinese companies from using their technological advantages to eliminate American competitors. But whatever the strategy, the window for action is closing rapidly. So here's the fundamental question that should keep American strategic planners awake at night. If China can double battery energy density while controlling the global supply chain and implementing export restrictions to protect their advantages, what does that mean for American technological independence? Are we witnessing the emergence of a new kind of technological dependency that could fundamentally alter the balance of global power? And perhaps most importantly, is America prepared to make the kinds of sustained strategic investments necessary to compete in an industry that will define economic and military competitiveness for decades to come? The Chinese lithium breakthrough isn't just about better batteries, it's about who controls the technological foundation of the future. And right now, that future is being written in Chinese laboratories and manufactured in Chinese factories, with export controls ensuring that American access depends on Beijing's strategic calculations. The question isn't whether this will reshape global technology competition. It's whether America has the will and the capability to respond before this technological gap becomes permanent.